Lesson 14.5 is identify quadrilaterals level 2 in a mixed review. I went ahead and wrote down all the identifications or the characteristics of the shapes. I don't need quadrilateral on there because these are telling you they're quadrilaterals. You're deciding what type. Might also help to get this page back out too, just to remind yourself that if something is a square, it's also a rhombus, it's also a rectangle, it's also a parallelogram, trapezoid, all the way up. If something's a rhombus, it's not a square rectangle, but it's everything above it, parallelogram and a trapezoid. And if something's a rectangle, same thing, it's everything above it. If something's a parallelogram, it's also a trapezoid. And trapezoid is only a trapezoid in this case. So let's try reading number 1. And again, seeing it says choose all answers. So drawing these would probably help the best, and I always draw them to where they look like a rectangle. That doesn't mean anything. I need to label this as L, M, N, O. Doesn't matter how you label it, just go in a circle somehow. It says that the measure of angle L is equal to the measure of M is equal to the measure of angle N equal to the measure of angle O. So equal, 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 equal. That right there means it could be a square, could be a rhombus, could be a rectangle, definitely not a parallelogram, as in just a parallelogram. So I should say that it could be a parallelogram also, but it's not one where it's got just these two equal and just these two. Also tells me that the diagonal L to N here bisects angle L and N. So that actually more specifically tells me these angles should be equal, and I know that's not drawn very good, and these angles are equal. I remember reading about that. That was in my square properties. Diagonals bisect the vertex angles. Diagonals bisect the vertex angles. This also says the other diagonal MO bisects angles M and O. So that is enough to tell me that this is a square because of this. So this guy is a square, which, remember then, if it's a square, it's everything else, because that means then it must have 4 right angles, which makes it a rectangle. It is a rhombus, and it is a trapezoid, and it is a parallelogram. All right, number 2, we've got quadrilateral BCDE. So again, I'm going to make it look like a rectangle, but that doesn't mean anything necessarily. BCDE. Telling me that side length BC is equal to ED or DE, that CD and EB are equal, and that the diagonals have equal length. Looks like a rectangle to me because I know that opposite sides are congruent in a rectangle. Doesn't tell me anything about the angles, that's okay. It also tells me here that the diagonals are congruent. Diagonals are congruent, so that would be a rectangle. Because I don't have enough info to classify this as a square. I can't say it because these two angles are different. I also can't say it's a rhombus because of that reason, and I don't know what the angles on the inside are doing. So I would say rectangle, and if it's a rectangle, that automatically makes it a parallelogram and a trapezoid. And then number 3, I have quadrilateral NOPQ. And it tells me that OP and NQ are parallel. And it tells me that those same sides OP and NQ are congruent. And it tells me that the diagonals are perpendicular. So they make 90s here in the center, even though my picture doesn't look like it. So with that info, I know that this is considered a parallelogram because it has one set of parallel and congruent sides, meaning that the other two sides must also be parallel and congruent. So I know it's a parallelogram. Then that makes it also a trapezoid. I can't say that it's a square since I don't know anything about the sides, but I do know that a rhombus has diagonals are perpendicular. So right here, this statement says it's a parallelogram. I just proved that. And the diagonals are perpendicular. So this would be a rhombus, which is not necessarily a rectangle because we don't know anything about the other angles. So it's just a rhombus and a trapezoid. So kind of confusing. Use these points to help you and refer back to this little chart as well.